There is one sentence, just one. And when you finally say it, when you truly mean it, when it comes from a place so deep inside you that it no longer sounds like a question, a request, or another exhausted attempt to keep the peace, something changes. Not because those words are magical, not because they contain some hidden power. Everything changes because the person saying them is no longer the same person the narcissist believed they understood. You become someone they never prepared for, someone they never planned around, someone they spent years trying to weaken little by little, thought by thought, boundary by boundary, until your sense of self felt smaller and easier to control. But somehow, they failed. And that sentence is coming. Stay with me, because what happens before you say it matters just as much as the words themselves. What you went through was not simply a bad relationship. It was not just a misunderstanding. It was not merely a difficult season, a poor match, or two people who could not communicate properly. Something deeper was happening. Your sense of self was slowly being worn down by someone who needed you to feel small so they could feel powerful. Someone who needed you confused so they could feel in control. If that feels painfully familiar, if your chest tightened for a moment, if some quiet part of you said, yes, that is exactly what happened, then keep listening, because this message is for you. And in the next few minutes, I want to reveal what a narcissist truly fears, because most people misunderstand this completely. And once you recognize it, you will never look at the situation the same way again. Most people believe a narcissist is afraid of being exposed. They think that if they gather enough evidence, save enough messages, tell enough people, or finally speak the perfect words in front of the right audience, the narcissist will break down. Others believe the narcissist fears anger. They think that if they stop being polite, raise their voice, and finally fight back with the same intensity they have received for so long, the narcissist will retreat. And then there are people who have been stuck in the cycle for years who begin to believe the narcissist is afraid of losing them. They start thinking their value is proven by how desperately the narcissist tries to pull them back. But that is not the deepest fear, not even close. What truly unsettles a narcissist is not exposure. It is not your anger. And it is not even the thought of losing access to you during some dramatic final confrontation. What shakes them most is a person who no longer needs them to decide what is real. A person who no longer asks for permission to trust their own thoughts. A person who has rebuilt an inner foundation so calm, so steady, and so secure that charm, rage, guilt, pressure, or one final performance can no longer push them off balance. That is what they cannot easily control. A narcissist fears someone who is completely finished. Not dramatically finished, not emotionally wounded, but still waiting. Not the kind of finished that keeps checking the phone for a message, real finished. Quiet finished, final finished. The kind of finish that closes a door and does not stand there waiting for someone to knock. The kind of silence that communicates more than 1,000 arguments ever could. And if you want to understand why that silence can be so unsettling, stay with me, because the next part connects all the pieces. To understand that fear, you first have to understand what narcissism can actually look like. And I do not mean the simple version people see online. It is not always the loud person who talks about themselves all day, demands attention, and acts as if everyone owes them praise. Some may look like that, but many do not. Some are polished, some are charming. Some can appear caring and thoughtful, especially in the beginning. Some speak softly, some seem generous. Some appear deeply hurt, almost vulnerable, as if they are simply waiting for someone who will finally love them correctly. Some can look exactly like the person you trusted most, exactly like the person you imagined a future with, exactly like the person you defended when others quietly questioned the relationship. That is why this can become so confusing. What connects these patterns is not simply having a large ego. It is something deeper, a difficulty accepting that another person is a separate human being with their own needs, emotions, boundaries, choices, and right to exist independently. That is where the deeper problem can appear. You were not always treated as a complete person. You were treated according to the role you played, a source of attention, a mirror, a supporter, a stabilizer, a problem solver, a target, someone expected to absorb the pressure while keeping everything together. And the moment you stopped performing that role exactly as they wanted, something changed. Suddenly your needs became selfish, your boundaries became disrespect, your questions became attacks, your independence became betrayal, your silence became punishment, your refusal became a problem. Think about that for a moment. The issue was not always what you did. Sometimes the issue was that you stopped doing what kept their system comfortable. And that is where your strength begins to return. Because when you begin to see this clearly, you stop spending all your energy trying to convince them of what happened. You stop building your entire case in your head. You stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. You stop wondering which explanation will finally make them understand your pain. This is important, very important. Your freedom does not begin when they finally admit what they did. Your freedom begins when their agreement is no longer required for you to believe yourself. Read that again in your mind. You do not need their confession to know what you experienced. You do not need their apology to justify your boundary. You do not need their permission to step away. And you certainly do not need to keep proving your worth to someone who benefited from making you question it. This is why your calm can become more powerful than your anger. Anger can still keep you emotionally connected. Arguments can still keep the relationship alive inside your mind. Constant explanations can still leave you waiting for a reaction. But peace changes the entire structure. When you become calm enough to stop explaining, something inside you becomes difficult to manipulate. When you become grounded enough to stop chasing answers, the old cycle loses fuel. When you become strong enough to accept that you may never receive the ending you wanted, you begin creating your own ending. And this is the part many people miss. You do not have to defeat someone to become free from them. You only have to stop allowing them to occupy the center of your inner world. Stay with me, because now we are getting closer to the sentence itself. That sentence is not an insult. It is not a threat. It is not designed to make them jealous. It is not meant to trigger them, punish them, or force them to finally realize what they lost. It is powerful for a completely different reason. It represents a decision that does not depend on their response. A decision that comes from the deepest part of you saying, I know what I know, and I am no longer abandoning myself to keep this relationship alive. That is the real shift. You are no longer trying to win the conversation. You are choosing yourself. You are no longer trying to make them understand your boundaries. You are living them. You are no longer waiting for them to become different before you allow yourself to breathe. You are accepting what is in front of you and deciding what you will do with it. And once that happens, their old methods may stop working the way they once did. The guilt does not pull you back as quickly. The silent treatment does not make you panic in the same way. The sudden kindness does not automatically erase everything that happened. The dramatic promises do not instantly rebuild trust. The accusations do not make you question every decision. Why? Because something has changed inside you. You have stopped negotiating with the version of yourself that believed love required self-abandonment. You have stopped confusing chaos with connection. You have stopped measuring your worth by whether someone chooses you. And when that happens, the sentence is no longer simply something you say. It becomes something you live. That is why it carries weight. Not because the sentence has supernatural power, but because you finally mean it. And when you truly mean it, the person standing in front of the narcissist is no longer the person they thought they could control. So remember this when you are tempted to explain yourself one more time. Remember it when you feel the urge to send another long message. Remember it when they suddenly become warm after being cold. Remember it when they make you question whether you were too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional, or somehow responsible for everything that happened. Pause, breathe, come back to yourself. You do not have to respond to every accusation. You do not have to correct every lie. You do not have to prove every truth. You do not have to attend every argument you are invited into. Sometimes the strongest answer is the boundary you actually keep. Sometimes the most powerful response is refusing to return to the same cycle. And sometimes the sentence you have been afraid to say is simply the sentence that closes the chapter, I am done. Not I am done if you change. Not I am done unless you apologize. Not "I am done," but "I hope you come back." Just "I am done," quietly, clearly, without a performance, without begging them to understand, without waiting for applause. Because the real transformation is not that the narcissist suddenly loses power. It is that you stop handing your power away. And if you remember only one thing from this entire message, remember this: your peace does not need their permission. Your reality does not require their agreement. Your boundary does not need their approval. And your future does not have to be controlled by someone who benefited from your confusion. The moment you choose yourself without needing them to understand why, the entire dynamic begins to change. That is the sentence. And this time you are not saying it to make them react. You are saying it because you finally believe yourself. The punishment began, not because they truly missed you as a person, but because you were no longer acting in a way that served their needs. I know that truth can hurt. I know a part of you may still want to fight against it. But stop for a moment and ask yourself this: when did they genuinely celebrate your happiness without somehow making it about themselves? When did they sit beside your pain without turning the attention back toward their own suffering? When did you clearly state a boundary and they simply respect it because it mattered to you? These questions can be painful. Clarity can hurt, but clarity is also where healing begins. This kind of control does not appear overnight. It is built slowly, almost piece by piece. It often begins with mirroring. In the beginning, they can seem like everything you've been looking for. They reflect your values. They repeat your dreams. They seem to understand your wounds with almost unbelievable accuracy. They know what to say at exactly the right moment. The connection feels familiar quickly, safe quickly, special quickly. And that speed can become part of the hook. Sometimes it may not even be fully planned in some cold, calculated way. Sometimes they may also believe the role they are showing you during those early moments. And that is exactly what can make everything so confusing later. But here is the painful part. The version of them you became attached to may have reflected your own goodness, your own depth, your loyalty, and your hope. You saw your best qualities reflected back and thought, finally, someone understands me. Then slowly the cracks appeared, the distance appeared, the dismissive comments appeared. The cruelty showed itself in moments you could not make sense of. And your mind did something completely human. It held on to the first image. It convinced you that the loving version was the real person, while the cruel version was caused by stress, fear, pressure, old wounds, difficult timing, or somehow even by you. And that is where the internal battle began. It became a war between what you experienced and what you were being told, between what your body sensed and what your mind kept trying to explain away, between your own memories and the version of events being handed back to you. This is one reason the cycle can feel so difficult to escape. You are not simply walking away from another person. You are trying to separate yourself from a story that kept changing while you were still living inside it. And that confusion is not always accidental. The confusion itself can become part of the control. This is where the mental trap becomes much deeper. People use the word gaslighting often, but many people do not realize how deeply it can affect someone. It is not only about denying one event or changing the details of one argument. One of the most damaging forms is when your entire ability to judge reality begins to weaken. It is the slow process of teaching you to doubt your own mind. You say something hurtful happened, and you are called too sensitive. You remember a promise, and suddenly you are told it never happened. You respond to obvious cruelty, and somehow you become the unstable one. Your needs are labeled selfish. Your grief is called manipulation. Your anger is used as evidence that you are the problem. Your memory is questioned. Your instincts are called dramatic. Your boundaries are treated like attacks. Slowly, almost silently, you stop asking yourself what you think and feel. Instead, you begin watching them. What mood are they in today? What are they going to allow? What version of the story are they using now? What can you say without creating another fight? That shift is enormous, because once you start doing that, you are no longer living from your own center. You are constantly orbiting theirs. And if you have ever stood in the middle of your own life and felt strangely disconnected from yourself, if you have ever whispered, "I do not even know what is real anymore," then listen carefully. That confusion is not your identity. It does not prove that you are weak. It does not mean you are broken, and it does not mean you were foolish. It may mean that your trust in your own mind was repeatedly challenged until doubt became automatic. That is very different. And once you understand that difference, something begins to come back. Not everything at once, not overnight, but enough. Enough for you to take the first step toward yourself again. And then there is trauma bonding. This is where many people become even more confused because they ask themselves a question that seems impossible to answer. If this person hurt me so much, why do I still miss them? Why do you still think about the good moments? Why do you still hope they will become the person they were in the beginning? Why can one kind message suddenly make you question everything you decided? Why can a small moment of warmth feel so powerful after days or weeks of coldness? The answer is not that you are weak. It is not that you secretly want to suffer. It is that repeated cycles of pain and relief can create a powerful emotional attachment. When kindness comes after cruelty, relief can feel enormous. When affection appears after rejection, it can feel like oxygen. When peace arrives after chaos, your nervous system can grab onto it with everything it has. And then the cycle repeats. Hurt, distance, hope, relief, hurt again. Over time, the highs and lows can become connected in your mind. You begin waiting for the next moment of relief. You may even mistake that relief for love. This is why leaving can feel harder than you expected. You are not only grieving the person, you are grieving the future you imagined, the version of them you hoped would return, and the version of yourself you were before all the confusion began. Stay with me here because this next part matters. You need to understand that missing someone does not automatically mean you should return to them. Feeling attached does not mean the relationship was healthy. Having good memories does not erase painful ones. And loving someone does not require you to keep giving them access to you. Sometimes healing begins when you stop asking, how can I make this person treat me better? And begin asking, what happens to me every time I stay in this cycle? That question changes the direction of your attention. It brings you back to yourself. And slowly, the center of your life begins moving back where it belongs. One of the most misunderstood parts of this entire experience is trauma bonding. People watching from the outside sometimes look at survivors and ask painfully unfair questions. Why did you stay? Why did you return? Why did you defend someone who was hurting you? But trauma bonding is not stupidity. It is not weakness. It is not a lack of self-respect. And it is certainly not proof that you wanted the pain. It can be a powerful response within the nervous system. When fear, confusion, emotional pain, and short moments of relief are repeated again and again, the brain can begin creating a very strong attachment. The same person who hurts you can become the person who briefly makes you feel better. The same person who creates the panic can become the one who suddenly stops it for a moment. That can create dependency, not because the relationship is healthy, but because the body is trying to survive what feels unpredictable. And survival responses can be incredibly strong, very strong. They can keep you emotionally attached long after your logical mind already understands what is happening. This is why leaving is not always just a simple decision. It can become a full-body process. You are breaking a pattern that has been deeply connected to your stress response. So if you have ever blamed yourself for loving them, missing them, or wanting relief from the same person who created the chaos, pause right here. Do not punish yourself for a response you were trying to survive. Your body was searching for safety in a place where safety kept changing. That is not a character defect. That is what can happen when unpredictability becomes connected to attachment. And here is the part you really need to hear, so stay with me. The love you gave was real. Your care was real. Your loyalty was real. But their ability to receive that love in a healthy, honest, and mutual way may never have been available. That difference is important because when you finally stop blaming yourself, the illusion begins to crack. Then one day, after enough pain, enough sleepless nights, enough searching for answers, enough silence, and enough moments when your heart knows something your mind is still trying to debate, something inside you changes. It may not look dramatic from the outside. There may be no huge speech, no perfect confrontation, no movie-style ending, but inside, a line is crossed. You stop trying to repair them. You stop explaining yourself in 10 different ways, hoping that the next explanation will finally reach them. You stop waiting for the apology. You stop waiting for the honest admission. You stop hoping for remorse so deep that it finally matches the damage you experienced. You stop waiting for them to say, yes, I hurt you. Yes, you were right. Yes, what happened was wrong. You no longer need them to approve your version of reality, and that becomes the turning point, because control often depends on emotional engagement. It feeds on your reaction, your tears, your hope, your anger, your confusion, your constant need to solve what was never resolved. All of it can keep the connection alive. Even anger can keep you attached. Even fighting back can keep you inside the same game. As long as your emotions are constantly moving around them, they can still feel important. They can still feel powerful. They can still feel like they occupy the center of your world. And that is one reason conflict may suddenly appear when things begin getting quiet. That is one reason they may reach out again when you start pulling away. It is not always love bringing someone back. Sometimes it is access. Sometimes it is the need to know they can still affect you. And when you finally stop reacting, not as an act, not as a tactic, but because something inside you has genuinely ended, the old pattern begins to break. Suddenly, there is less to pull, less to twist, less to provoke, less emotional fuel. And this is where the sentence begins to take shape. The sentence is not revenge. It is not a clever trick. It is not something you say to win one final argument. It only carries real weight when it is supported by an inner state that has finally stepped outside the storm. Before that, words are only words. But once something inside you has truly shifted, even a simple sentence can sound final. Because what truly unsettles a controlling person is not always your pain. Pain can be argued with. Pain can be used to create guilt, confusion, or another emotional reaction. What changes everything is your peace, real peace, the kind that does not ask for permission, the kind that does not beg to be understood, the kind that no longer needs someone else to choose you because you have already chosen yourself. Watch this carefully, because this is where many people become confused. When someone senses that you are genuinely moving beyond their reach, they may suddenly appear different, softer, kinder, more emotional, more open. They may promise understanding. They may promise therapy. They may promise personal growth. They may suddenly become the version of themselves you spent years hoping would appear. They may cry. They may say they finally understand. They may bring up beautiful memories. They may use exactly the words you always wanted to hear. And if you have spent years starving for clarity, that moment can feel almost impossible to resist. But do not ignore the pattern. Timing can reveal a great deal. Why does understanding appear when your door is finally closing? Why does tenderness return when your distance becomes real? Why does accountability suddenly show up when access is in danger? Stay with me here, because this distinction matters. False change can arrive wearing the clothing of your deepest hope, and if you are not careful, you can mistake another cycle for a breakthrough. That is why inner stability matters more than finding the perfect sentence ever will. The sentence, when it is finally real, can be this: I do not need you to agree with me for me to know what happened. That is the line. Simple, clear, quiet, final. And if you need something even shorter, it can be, I know what I experienced, or simply, I'm not explaining this anymore. The exact words are less important than the state behind them, because what you are really communicating is much bigger than a sentence. You are saying, my reality is no longer open for negotiation. You are saying, I am not giving you the authority to define my pain, my memories, my boundaries, or my truth. You are saying, I do not have to keep standing in a courtroom trying to prove what I lived through. The courtroom is closed, the debate is finished, the audience is gone, and you have walked away from the stage. That is what makes the shift so powerful. Not because you have defeated someone, not because you finally found the perfect comeback, but because you no longer need to participate in the same system. Once you begin trusting your own mind again, old tactics can lose their grip. The confusion starts to weaken. The hooks begin to loosen. Guilt becomes easier to recognize. Pressure becomes easier to see. Promises become easier to measure against actions. You stop listening only to what is being said and start watching what is actually happening. And that changes everything. You begin asking different questions, not how can I make them understand me, but what do their actions show me? Not what if they finally change, but what has actually changed? Not how do I make this person value me, but why am I still asking someone else to confirm my value? Those questions bring you back to yourself, and that is the part I want you to remember. You are not required to win the argument to reclaim your life. You are not required to receive an apology to create distance. You are not required to convince them that your pain was real. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop presenting evidence to someone who has already decided not to see it. And if you are still struggling with this, be gentle with yourself. Rebuilding trust in your own mind takes time. You may have days when you feel strong and days when you suddenly miss them. You may remember the good moments and wonder whether you made the wrong choice. You may feel guilt because you finally chose distance. None of that automatically means you should go back. Healing is rarely a straight line. There can be waves, there can be doubt, there can be memories that arrive without warning. Let them pass without turning every feeling into an instruction. Missing someone is a feeling. It is not always a direction. Guilt is a feeling. It is not always evidence that you did something wrong. Hope is a feeling. It does not always mean the situation has changed. This is where your new strength begins. You learn to notice what you feel without allowing every feeling to make the decision for you. You learn to pause. You learn to breathe. You learn to ask what is true now, not what you desperately wished had been true before. And slowly, the person you lost begins to matter less than the person you are becoming. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You begin noticing what brings peace instead of what creates anxiety. You remember that boundaries are not punishments. Silence is not cruelty. Distance is not hatred. Choosing yourself is not selfish. And you do not need to become cold to become strong. You simply need to become clear. That clarity is the opposite of the confusion that once controlled you. So when the old cycle tries to pull you back, remember the sentence, I do not need you to agree with me for me to know what happened. Say it quietly if you need to. Say it only to yourself if that feels safer. Because the deepest victory is not getting them to finally admit the truth. The deepest victory is reaching a place where you no longer need them to.